Hey everybody, how's it going? Today it's time for another segment of Lewis Rage Reads the News. Today's news is that a new New York City school chancellor wants longer school days, Saturday, and summer classes. Yes, at a time where we are starting to kind of try to mainstream the idea of a 4-day work week for normal people, we are going to ask for a 6-day work week for children. I am going to put my bias here up front. As I've made it clear on this channel many times, I have no love for the public school system. I went through K through 5 and what was considered one of, a quote, or higher scale area. My parents had a shitty house in a nice neighborhood, so I got to go to what would be considered a, quote, nice school in New York City. I went to intermediate school, and that was shit, and I went to Susan Wagner High School, and that was shit, literally besides 2 teachers that I had over the 4 years that I went there. I felt like my public schooling experience was for the most part a waste. I felt like I spent 7 to 9 hours a day inside of a building with bars on the window that felt like a prison, in a room with somebody that did not want to be there, that was only there for the paycheck, who was reading the most monotonous, miserable drivel to me in the most miserable way possible. None of us felt like we were learning. All of the kids in my class, and I do mean 100% of them, agreed that the system we were in was bullshit. This was a waste of time. There is literally anything we would rather do other than being here, and this is not learning. No one was engaged with the material. No one was engaged with the teacher. Everybody was either, playing with their Game Boy or messing around with something in their desk or just taking notes and pretending to pay attention. Nobody cared because they managed to take incredibly interesting topics, things that were really interesting, and somehow distill them in a manner where they were disseminated to us as just rapid-fire trivia facts which were completely irrelevant. They would just take really interesting topics in history and everything else and just distill it down to what happened on this date. What was the name of this person in this battle rather than the why and the how and the what and everything that was really interesting. But just to go into this article. It says, longer school days, classes on Saturdays and during the summer. Changing how students learn how to read, the New York City school chancellor said he is looking to shake up the system in order to get better results. In an exclusive interview with NBC New York, David Banks said everything is on the table, including some unorthodox methods in order to improve the city's public schools. A longer school day. Coming to school on Saturdays and summertime has been absolutely critical. Banks said of the programs that have been instituted as Eagle Academy network of schools, we've got to use the summer. We've got to use Saturdays. We're behind. And this is the thing that kills me. If you ask your average person that is going to a New York City public school, if you had asked any of the kids in my class what could be done to make school better, how about instead of teaching according to a very rigid curriculum, you actually teach in a manner that is actually interesting so that we stay awake? How about you get someone to show up in the classroom that doesn't hate the fact that they are there, hate children, be open with the fact that they hate kids, open with the fact that they would love teaching, if not for the fact that they had to deal with these kids. No, let's take the same shitty, garbage, crappy, 150-year-old, miserable fucking system and make it longer. Let's take this system where you have a bunch of kids that are miserable, fucking around with their phones all day because there's nothing else to do, and listening to the teacher when they are explaining things in the monotone, boring, miserable fashion that they are, often admittedly quite miserable at the fact that they are in school and having to be in a classroom with kids. Let's take that same system and just add a couple of hours to the day. Because if you take a miserable system where the kids feel like they're in prison and they hate where they are, and you just add a couple of hours to it, that fixes everything. And while he understands there may be some objections to his proposals, particularly from the powerful teachers union, he said change is necessary in order to best serve the students. Teachers very often may say, I don't want to work Saturday. I don't want to work all year long. But if we continue to do things the way we've been doing them, we'll continue to get the same results, says Banks. Now, I do agree with this part. If you continue to do things the way you've been doing them, you will continue to get the same results. If you continue to do the exact same thing that you are doing, but simply make the school day longer as you're doing the same shit that's not working, that's just doing more of the same shit that is not working. But the line that drives me nuts is the one that comes up in the next paragraph. It says, he also added that if teachers don't want to work the additional hours on Saturday over the summer, he'll bring in community groups to fill the void, all as part of the plan to break the mold when it comes to education. Banks noted that students should not be limited to only working with teachers in their own school building. He said that one positive takeaway from the pandemic may be how technology can be used to facilitate and expand the boundaries of the classroom, adding that the city should be the classroom. Quote, you can have access to the best teachers around the world, and it shouldn't just be limited to the teacher that's in the classroom, Banks said at a press conference on Thursday. Imagine a great science teacher who's on the other side of town, And yet the young people who go to this school may not have a great science teacher. We can use technology and innovation to see how do we connect the dots. And one of the things that drives me nuts about the public school system, or how New York City government deals with shit in general, is they act like something is a new idea when it came out 20 years ago. One of the things that bothers me more than anything else about the public school system, it's actually similar to what a good friend of mine said bothered her husband when he became a father. So he thought that he had an average experience as a kid. And he thought that, he had a couple of complaints, but he thought it was average. But he became really aggravated once he became a father. Once he became a father and started to experience the relationship that he had with his kids, that's when he really started to get more and more mad at his dad, because he realized, look at the quality of the relationship I have with my child. Look at the way that I'm able to have respect for my kids. They have mutual respect for me. Look at the manner within which I teach my kids things. Why couldn't my parents do that? And it wasn't until he experienced what it was like on the other end that he really started to get angry at the experience that he had. And that's how I feel about school. I decided a couple of years ago, I wanted to just deal with some of the subjects that I had trouble with in school. I just wanted to look them up on YouTube. Just let me see what I can get. And I shit you not, what I got when I would just use YouTube and search for a particular subject, I would get someone who was enthusiastic, happy, excited, really good at explaining it, took all the confusing parts, and really understood that I didn't know this yet. This teacher clearly remembered what it was like to be an idiot or ignorant and not get stuff, and they explained everything in a manner I understand, where I could understand. And as angry as I was at my public schooling experience, that made me even angrier, because this person who's explaining all of these concepts to me in a free YouTube video that costs $0 outside of the 30 or 40 bucks a month you pay for internet in order to see it, this person who's explaining this to me for free is doing a better job than an experience that I had in an environment where the tax dollars were somewhere around $14,000 to $20,000 per year per student. When I would watch those videos and realize just how easy it is to explain these particular concepts in a manner where they're actually understandable, it drove me nuts. I felt the same way that that father felt when he realized that he did not have to have a horrible relationship with his son to be a father. That same anger, that why didn't I get this experience? Why couldn't I have been taught in this particular way? But what made me even angrier than that was the recognition that everyday kids now, that's not the way they're learning. They're not learning from this great person. They're learning in a manner that is causing them to repeatedly fail and underperform when they make it to college, when they make it to general society, when there are way more efficient ways of teaching people, but we're not using them. We can't use them because we need to continue using the 150-year-old system that's in place that's clearly failing. Technology has made it possible for you to learn from somebody other than the person that you're in the room with. And the fact that it took until 2021 for someone to recognize this blows my mind. There are so many topics in school that were explained to me in my class horribly. I still remember classes where the teacher had to kind of, fudge the results on the tests because the entire class failed. It wasn't like 1 or 2 or 3 kids failed. The entire class failed because they were horrible at engaging the class, horrible at keeping our attention, horrible at explaining in a good way. And then you see that somebody just takes this topic that I struggled with for 2 or 3 years, and they explain it in a way that just makes sense. And it costs nothing. And it's actually better than what my parents are paying for through their tax dollars. Yes, you actually can have somebody from a room over there across town. You know what you can have? You can actually have someone across the country or across the globe teach you something. And also, let's just assume that the internet doesn't exist for a moment. Let's just assume that the internet doesn't exist, that there is no such thing as Zoom, there's no such thing as YouTube, there is no way for somebody over there to communicate with somebody over here in 2021. When they say, and they admit, this school has a good science teacher, and the young people who go to this school may not have a great science teacher. Why can't you fire them? Here's something you can do. You can fire them. If you have a science teacher that doesn't understand science, you tell them to go. If you have somebody that understands science but sucks at explaining it to kids, you can let them go. If you have someone that doesn't like being in a room with children but simply chooses to become a teacher because they would rather have power over other people, and many of the teachers I had did, they took that job because they loved the feeling of power they got over powerless children that they could just deal with as they please, you tell them to go. A lot of people think that I am this magical, amazing business owner, that I run this amazing business. I'll get these comments that idolize me, and I'm not. I'm not that smart. I'm not that great at what I do. I'm not that great a business person. But there's one thing that I do that allows my reputation of my business to be like this, 4.9 stars with over 1,400 reviews on Google, and other businesses to have reputations like this in my area, 2.4 stars with 9 reviews on Google. Do you know the difference between this business and this business? This business fires people that suck. This business probably doesn't. There are many times in the past where I have had to make the difficult decision to fire somebody that was not doing a good enough job. For whatever reason, whatever it is. I level with them, I work with them, you have a conversation with them, and sometimes it doesn't go anywhere. And when it doesn't go anywhere, or somebody, you just get that feeling that it's never going to get better, you tell them, listen, I'm sorry it didn't work out, bye. We don't do that in the New York City public school education system. My manager just had to do that this week. And here's the thing. You may think it's mean to fire people. You may think it's cruel to fire people. You know what's meaner than firing someone? Allowing the person who does a crappy job to be the person that is educating your children. I agree with the idea of using technology to allow a science teacher from this school to speak with kids from this school. If this person is good at explaining something and these people need it explained to them, using the internet to connect them, great idea. But the fact that we're using the idea that we're doing this to get around the fact that a school has a shitty teacher that you can't get rid of is insane. I was listening to people talk about this when I was a kid, when I was going to school in the 90s. I'm never going to forget, there was this one teacher that I had in 4th grade, Mrs. Friedland, that genuinely hated children. I remember actually having heart palpitations. I remember going to, having to go see the doctor over it because she actually gave me anxiety. She scared other kids. She scared the fuck out of everybody in our class to the point where people couldn't think straight. She was horrible, and she wound up actually getting promoted. The principal knew about this. The assistant principal knew about this. Other parents knew about this. I remember looking her up on LinkedIn when I finally got the internet. She actually got promoted. The way that they got rid of this horrible teacher is giving her a higher position within the Department of Education so that she was no longer a teacher rather than getting rid of her. This is normal. It should not be normal. But those are not the only changes the incoming Eric Adams administration may be looking to bring city schools. Corporate responsibility could soon be added to the Department of Education's core pillars like reading and writing. The incoming chancellor says that he wants to engage the private sector in public schools, touting his success at Eagle Academy network of schools has had in pulling private money and mentors. It was unclear if he would push the city to make it a voluntary program or a required one, similar to how the Bill de Blasio administration required real estate developers to build affordable housing in exchange for zoning accommodations. But a partnership between companies and public schools is going to be at the forefront of the administration's education policies. This is going to be our North Star, Banks said. I don't think that the clarion call has ever gone out for them to be more involved in the lives of public school students, and that call is going to go out under our administration. The longtime educator said that the mentorship program in particular is something that he could see working nationwide. The young men at Eagle have mentors, and these are the men who are lawyers, doctors, bankers, and architects. We can scale that across the city, he told News 4. You may not be able to do that for every single child, but at every single school there are young people out there screaming for additional help. They may not have a dad at home. Adams said that Thursday that 65% of black and brown children in the city never reach reading proficiency, and we act like that's normal, adding that if white children were in that situation, parents would, quote, burn the city down. In an effort to improve that, Banks told NBC New York that he plans to change how children are taught to read, believing that the current approach is, quote, fundamentally wrong. Part of Banks' plan would involve retraining early childhood teachers to emphasize phonics and sounding out the words rather than the method of balanced literacy, which he said has been used in NYC schools over the past 25 years. He said that approach has not worked, especially for black and brown children. I know how I learned to read was through a phonetical approach to reading, and I think we're going to get back to that, Banks said. Because if you don't establish a strong foundation, everything you do, you're just fighting an uphill battle. Funny thing, I actually wound up learning how to read in a lot of basic stuff because my mother got me a little smart alphabet desk. And she actually used to play with this thing with me when I was a kid. She actually spent time with me in this thing. And I remember learning more with this thing than I did in kindergarten, pre-K, and first grade combined. Let me see. It was this little thing over here. I don't know if anybody else actually remembers having something like this as a kid, but this was one of my first toys that I ever got, and I would play with it all day long. And I remember getting more engagement out of this than I did in the first few years of school. While he said he would like to implement the changes as fast as we can, Banks acknowledged that they will take some time and won't happen overnight. In the meantime, some have suggested one solution would be to open more charter schools. I'm for that. If you have a set of schools that does not work, Try funding schools that are doing something different. Try funding a different approach that may actually work. Former New York City Mayor Michael, oh man, that you got me there with the typo. I can't believe this one typo changed my ability to read the sentence. Former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg last week pledged $750 million to support charters across the country, but as of now, the city is maxed out on opening new charter schools unless the state votes to lift its cap. Of course, we have a cap on how many schools are allowed to open that challenge the current way that we do school. God forbid the teachers' union get any competition. But Banks knows it's a very political question to raise the limit, even if it is what he would want to do. We want to scale excellence. So if that means opening a few more charter schools, that's what we're going to do, he said, if we can get the state to approve it. And I hope they do. He also hopes that Bloomberg and others like him will get behind his vision for this future of New York City public schools. I'm encouraging Mayor Bloomberg, the philanthropic community, CEOs of major companies to lean in on the traditional public school system, said Banks, because at the end of the day, most of our children will continue to go to our traditional public schools. Here is just one plea that I have for most of the people in my audience. One of the things that drove me nuts when I was younger is even when I was 17 years old, I remember virtually everybody around me kind of remembered what it was like to deal with public school. They remember thinking, this is BS. Why am I here? This is a waste of time. I'm not going to use any of this. They remember what it was like to sit there for 7 to 8 hours a day and have someone just read off trivia to them without context, without excitement, without passion, for 7 or 8 or 9 hours a day. And they remember it being bullshit. And then somehow, when they go from being 17 to being 18, it's just like something clicks. It's like they're out of the prison. And once they're out of the prison, they forget what it was like to be in the prison. And then once they get into their 20s or their 30s or their 40s, you'll hear them say, public education is very important. We support public education. We believe in our youth. But when they, which is a great thing. Again, education is a great thing. But then they pretend that the experience that they went through is education, that it wasn't 6 to 8 hours a day stuck in a prison with somebody who did not want to be there, who admittedly very often treated you very adversarially, who didn't even really like the fact that they were in the room with you. It's weird to me how people completely forget how much the experience of public school sucked, even for people who weren't bullied. I mean, that's another thing altogether. They just forget how much it sucked when they grow up, and you'll hear so many platitudes about how maybe if you just add a couple of hours to the school day and add a couple more days to the misery, it'll just go away. And for me, it feels like so many people need the public schooling system, not as an education system, as a daycare system, so that they can have either time off from parenting or the ability to go to work, that they're willing to just have it stay as it is, because to reshape it in any serious, tangible way might disrupt the system that we have that we're using as a daycare. But at the end of the day, I do believe that we can aspire to something greater than a system where property taxes fund daycare that your kids hate, that you hated. And I think that starts with remembering just how bad the experience was for you, so that when you are coming up with solutions, when you are coming up with ideas on how to make it better, those are based in the reality of what it felt like when you were a kid, remembering that you were stuck in this room all day. I'm never going to forget being stuck. Like one of the 3 good teachers at Susan Wagner High School, Mr. George Anthony. I remember one of the kids in his class, he said, I can't wait till I leave high school so that I can be done with learning. And it was just one of those statements where he stopped the entire class and said, firstly, I apologize, because it's our profession that got you to the point to associate what you hate with learning. You don't hate learning. You probably love learning. How does it feel when you hear a story about something that happened in the past that you didn't know about? When you learn how something is made? When you learn how to get to a new level in a video game? When you learn how to, or something new in a sport? You don't hate learning. You hate this experience of a disinterested person that's adversarial towards you, that doesn't really even like you, spitting trivia at you for 6 to 8 hours while you're in a room with bars in the windows. And he's like, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. I don't hate learning. But the fact that he just kind of instinctively jumped to, I can't wait to be done with this because I can't wait to be done with learning, was so depressing, so pathetic, that we have a system that actually takes the zest that somebody young might have for learning and just beats it out of them in this miserable system that has had minuscule changes made to it over the past 150 years. Because that's what this is. This is based on a 150-year-old system that we are still using. And in so many other areas of society, systems that are 5 years old, 10 years old, 20 years old are replaced entirely. Whole just done with, just started from scratch, and a new system is put into place. Yet for some reason here, we just take a 150-year-old system and make minor tweak here, little iteration here, minor tweak here. This needs to be tossed out, tossed in the trash, and redone. The fact that I could learn better from a free YouTube video, what took 2 to 3 years of learning in Myra S. Barnes IS-24 in New York City. It's pathetic. But it's also encouraging and inspiring. We have so many new ways of being able to educate people. We have so many new ways of being able to disseminate information. I've had so many people show up into my store with pictures and say, Louis, I used to work at Walmart. I used to work at Home Depot. I used to deliver pizzas. Here is a picture of my setup. I now make $60,000 or $80,000 or $90,000 a year fixing stuff. Thank you. I learned how to do that from your videos. I barely graduated high school. I don't have a college degree. I don't have any qualifications on how to teach. I'm a dude that just uploads videos on how to do what he does every day to the internet. And somehow, through this entire system that we have created that has existed outside of the teachers union, outside of the Department of Education, outside of people having to pay to learn, somehow my videos kind of doing board repair rose to the cream of the crop. Jess's board repair videos started to rise to the cream of the crop. Jesse Cruz's stuff started to rise in Facebook groups. Paul Daniels' software kind of started to rise and replace Flex Board View. The stuff that was necessary, the stuff that was done well, just kind of rose to the top. And the system that we have made that available for free so that millions of people who wish to learn how to do this can learn how to do this and start making shit work again immediately. When it comes to math, science, physics, calculus, history, everything else, the first result on YouTube, I'm not even saying that I have to scroll. I'm not even saying that I'm scrolling and digging. The first result on YouTube does a better job of explaining it than every single teacher I've had. Besides Dr. Young at Susan Wagner High School, George Anthony in Wagner High School, and Mr. Bashkim Palenkovic in Wagner High School. Those three are the exceptions to the rule. Besides those three, who actually care about their craft, and God bless them. I hope they stay in that system, because somebody who is competent, who cares about their job, who is excited about teaching kids is fucking needed in a system where that is the 1%, that is the minority. Besides that, when I search for anything, a description of a book, a description of an event in history, an idea on how to understand this basic thing in calculus, the first result on YouTube explains it better than any of my teachers did in 13 years. And that's a fucking joke. That's sad. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. This really had no rhyme, reason, or structure to it. It was just a rant because, again, at 33 years old, it pisses me off intensely how people that were sitting next to me in the same classes that I were, just a few years later, start to pretend that their experience didn't suck when they know it did. They said it sucked at the time. They admitted they learned nothing from it at the time. And then they just send the next generation into the same chopping block. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. That's it for today. And as always, I hope you learned something. Also, thank you very much to Catherine Anna Hauserman, one of my moderators, for getting Mr. Clinton this set of greenies. They showed up at the store today. You hear him? He's so fucking mad. He's mad. See? This is a Clinton over here. See? Take a greenie. See? You always say that I don't give you greenies to come up on the chair anymore. You got 5 greenies. Clinton? Clinton? Oh, well. See you in the next video.